I grew up, I guess what you call it, a lot of folks call old time music family. My dad played the fiddle, my mom played the claw hammer banjo. And, I guess it was just kind of music from home, mountain music growing up is what, kind of predated bluegrass. But I guess, originally, there was a lot of different, you got your Scotch, Irish, African, Native American, German, English, a lot of different traditions just kind of coming together. And then, we're, in this area specifically, a lot of it's passed down through families and generations, but I think a lot of fiddle music, I think a lot of old songs, kind of ballads, I think of banjo, specifically, I guess, old time banjo styles, which would either be like claw hammer fralin or like an up picking style that was kind of before, Bill Monroe and Earl Scraggs specifically, I guess that style of bluegrass. And definitely dance. I feel like there's a lot of, I think old time music, definitely there's a lot of dance component to it. And I grew up, going to, dances with my family that they played a lot. And then also just, I guess, a lot of community involved too. Like, I think it's a big part, not only like performing wise, like my parents performed a lot of places, like festivals and things, like growing up, and I have too, but also like that, like home component too. I think there's a lot of it just tied to like life and the way of life, and just like tunes for joy or dances for joy, or like, just things passed down. You think of family. Yeah, like I said, ever since I was, a baby, I guess my parents were playing music, and my Uncle Albert, who passed before I was born, but he was a big part of the fiddle making community. He passed on traditions as well as fiddling to like Wayne Henderson, different people like that who live right around, where down the road. But and my cousin Audrey, who was a fiddle maker. But there was always like a family, like everybody was playing, like, you'd have jams, or they would be playing around the house. But then like on the weekends or whatever, be out performing or traveling. It was a great way to also just like meet all different types of people. And I think one thing about like my dad, he was older when, when we came along. So, when he was growing up, he just said, well, it was all just music. It wasn't like old time music, bluegrass music, mountain music, country music, whatever. It was just music. And you played what you liked, but I guess what you were surrounded by, if you grew up in the mountains, I guess that was a lot of, I guess what folks call mountain music, or when people are kind of, calling a genre of music. Yeah, so it was just a big part of life. Just my parents taught music too and passed it on in the local school where I went, and just in community like lessons and things like that. So it was just always a big part of, I grew up dancing, then I started playing. It was never something like we were forced to do, but it was something that we were just, I guess, immersed in so much. It would probably been a choice not to do it more than to do it, because so many family members or just community people played. As far as women's part, music has always been a big part of, but now as much as ever, I think no matter what your gender identity is, I think we all kind of pull together, keeping the music alive, keeping the music moving forward, passing it on. But I think definitely like I think there's always been a really strong, in my personal experience, but also like I think on a wider experience within like the old time music or mountain music or country music in general. If you think of the Carter family, you think of locally, like my mom, Emily Spencer, and Becky Barr were in the White Top Mountain Band, and then later Nancy Gentry and Michelle. So there was always a lot of, growing up, there was always some strong female old-time musicians I looked to, but I think even more so, we see more today. And I think there's also a really great thing of like women supporting women and kind of highlighting women that maybe don't always, like you said, has been kind of a male-dominated field. And I think getting their voices shared or music shared, or just supporting, like sometimes some festivals can be like more dominated toward like getting just supporting each other and sharing everyone's story, because I think that's a really part of, always has been, but still today a very important part of the tradition. Yeah. I mean, I've always loved music, and I think I always loved being a part of it. And I also just found it a really great way to express myself with songwriting too. Like I said, I grew up in the fiddle and dancing and just banjo traditions. I started playing different instruments from a young age, but also I think it was a good way. I was just drawn to the community, but I love to perform. I like to travel. I enjoy meeting people of all walks of life. I think it's just a great way to connect with people and to share your stories and people who have passed on that showed you things. Like, I think it's just a great way of taking who you are and sharing that with the world or people you loved that are no longer there. And I think that's a big part of, I like to perform. I love to see new places, meet new people. But as far as female musicians that inspired me, I think, like I said, I grew up with there was always a strong, I think my mom, Becky Barr were in the White Top Mountain Band. Then I would see my cousin Audrey was a really, she is an instrument maker, and also a lot of people would take their instruments for her to fix. And so she was a really big part of the community. She sang songs. Who was Albert Hash's daughter, and she was a a strong female. I saw that a lot of also I think other men that my dad definitely he would be oh, take it to Audrey, she knows what she's doing, as well as other women, but also men as well, kind of looking to her as well, anybody looking to her, I guess. And then Barbara Poole, who played with Larry Sigmund, I grew up seeing them dance in the old time music scene, and she was a great bass player, really unique style, who I play with Larry now. Her bass playing definitely influenced me. I grew up seeing the Roan Mountain Hilltoppers with Janice Birchfield, who was a pretty big leader of that band on the tub bass. And I would see, some, Trish Ford would come and take lessons off my mom when I was a kid, or Crystal Blevins, or I would see the Bowmans, Marsha Bowman, different people in the local community scene, that I saw these women doing, playing music, and, my cousin Nita, different people like that. But also on a broader scale, I guess, people I grew up going to the Carter family fold as well. And so my parents would play there. And so I saw Jeanette Carter. She was a really strong, leading the fold there, as a venue leader as well as a musician, and, just carrying on that traditions. And then, from that, sometimes June Carter, I remember being a kid and seeing Johnny and June there. And some of the, all the Carter sisters in general, I think, so I think obviously you start with the Carter family, with so many recordings and but also the generations behind them that kind of kept that going. So I would see that. And then, people like Dolly Parton, who's did so many wonderful things for just coming from Appalachia, or Loretta Lynn on the country note. And, I think around the Nashville area, when I, traveling a bit more, I would see Lily Mae, who is a contemporary artist who plays Appalachian music, but also her own music, kind of, and lots of different genres of music, but who's real, her and her sister Scarlett and Grace and Edward Dawn, they're all really strong musicians, just great instrumentalists, and just really supporting other women. And so I've plays, I got to know them. I think they're real inspiring. Folks like the legendary Ingram Metz, who I've recorded, they recorded a little bit on my last CD. I think from the Richmond area, there's real strong. So I think a lot of those women, and I guess Hazel and Alice, and Ola Belle Reed was a cousin of mine who was a really strong, her mom's from White Top, Cabin Creek. So obviously her banjo playing and songwriting was something high on a mountain. Her son told me she wrote that up there where I'm from. Tear Down the Fences. She was such a strong, inspiring songwriter. Her, Elizabeth Cotton. There's just so many great, and then even folks when I would do interview projects, I found with some men you would hear that were banjo players that say, well, I listened to Cousin Emmy on the radio, or there was this lady Jincy who from locally who had her arm cut off in the cotton gin. She would play the banjo with the stub of her arm, and she was somebody I learned from. Or my Uncle Albert would talk about Nancy Blevins, there's that fiddle tune, Nancy Blevins, that was a tune she played. So there was a lot of women maybe who weren't as well known, they weren't recorded, but they're maybe for whatever reason, but they definitely influenced locally. My Aunt Ethel showed my dad some of his, first guitar chords. But she didn't play out as much like Albert did. But so I think I found even people who weren't maybe as well known in that sense. It was interesting how much of a part maybe that they played in keeping, passing on things. I think, yeah, like you said, I think probably, especially earlier on, and I think even today too, there's some expectations put on women as far as their role as a mother, or even just the lifestyle of traveling and all the things that come with that. Yeah, definitely. I think there's certain things, as in the family that are expected, whether maybe they weren't able to, or maybe just whoever was pushing the music, was maybe pushing more of, like you said, a male-dominated thing, or just, I think the music business is totally different than also, when you are navigating with any type of music business. Sometimes you have to say, well, what is somebody's motivation with working with you, and all sorts of things that maybe, and I'm sure some men have to deal with that too, but I would say, some women definitely you have to think about that, I think. But also, yeah, I think, like you said, I'd say probably like just like I wrote a song called, there's this old Appalachian saying, so, whistling women and crow and hens will never come to no good end. And I changed crow and chickens, but which is kind of like a saying of like, don't kind of step, don't try to, step out of your place or whatever in a way. But, and I kind of finished it, but my mama told me there's no such thing. So I'm going to cry, whistle, and sing. So I think it's kind of, like you said, nowadays too, I think it's a good place for women to kind of have that opportunity to share more, like get out more. But yeah, I think that could have been a thing as far as that goes. And also like another song, I recorded that at Big Town with, I would say Abby the Spoon Lady, who I think is a real, neat lady, Sierra Farrell and Kalia Eagle and Jamie Collins, who I play the Bluegrass Girls with, which I think it's really fun to, like I said, women supporting women, like a project, like where they're playing with other women and just, I think it's a really great camaraderie of like, I don't know, like, anyway, songs like that, or I wrote one, She's Her Own Woman, kind of just saying like, sometimes, somebody's like, well, that's such and such's wife, or that's such and such, but it's like, not being afraid to do your own thing. And because sometimes, like you said, there are expectations like, oh, why aren't you married, or why aren't you doing this, or why, and I think one thing I think with, a lot of people I've been inspired to see is people who aren't afraid just to, let them talk, whatever, like do your thing and just live your life, because you only live once, and it inspires other people, like you said, to be able to not be afraid to do that too. Well, I think, I do think I do think there are really a lot of people who are encouraging to women too. Like, and I have had so many great people, females and males, that have definitely, made me believe in myself, or made me feel welcome in the scene, or in that space to perform, or just in a jam, or whatever it would be. But also, I think there are sometimes like macho sort of like expecting you maybe not to be able to take a break on your instrument, or do you just sing, or whatever it is. Like, there's certain, I think everybody's probably ran into that, or people's, I don't want to, but be too negative, but I think at times, like, sometimes people will say, oh, well, it's just about, put you in a cage, how you look and watch you dance, or something, or something like that, which you probably wouldn't, so things like that can be a little demeaning, I think, at times, and now people are kind of joking, but I do think there are times where, like you said, like if you're working with somebody, you kind of have to be like, what's their motivation, or people taking you serious, or like you said, expecting you to be like, oh, why aren't you married? Why aren't you doing this? Or why are you, I guess expectations of like, yeah, I think, and obviously with, in general, every musician who's, trying to get out there right now with COVID, no matter what, but I do think, yeah, sometimes it can be harder, but I have had a lot of people that have made me very welcome, and I definitely have seen a lot of, men and women, be very, supporting of like, welcoming, and also I think, like I said, playing with the Bluegrass Girls, or like done some stuff with Kelsey Ray, or different women, Lily Mae, and it's just really nice to, I don't know, I think it's inspiring, or even working with the jam program to see like a new generation coming through of people. Oh yeah, I think it was just real inspiring. It was gave me a lot of confidence to be who I am today and to play music. And like I said, I still play with my mom. I play with Kelly Broad, who's another kind of member of the family, and the Bluegrass Girls with Brett Morris, who leads the jam program, and Jamie Collins, who's plays from Bristol here, but also teaches a lot of music and plays a lot of music out there. Different folks I've mentioned too, and also the Bluegrass Girls with another Jill Beaton, who is kind of does a lot of vintage photography and things like that. We've been doing a project in the last few years called Women in Roots, where we've specifically in Appalachia, because Appalachian Community Fund has helped us with it a bit, but where we focused on different women and music, crafts, cooking, and kind of getting their stories. Like Angie Vai, who is a great bass player. I grew up, she would come to the house, or Linda Sigmund, who's Larry's wife, who does pickle making. Just different things like that, and it's been really nice to get their stories, and of all generations, because I do think just showing like the older generation, making sure their stories are also captured, as well as like a younger generation too. I do think sometimes I think women, not always, I think on a general, I'm not saying necessarily just in old time music, but I just maybe in a general sense, like the idea of like, oh, if you're a certain age, or if you don't look a certain way, or whatever, like your value is like based upon something, and women are, so strong and so much of a part, especially of Appalachian culture, and just like a big part of it goes beyond anything like, of that, and I think that's an important thing of, just the value of all the, I don't know what the right word for it is, but all, they've done to keep the music or the crafts or cooking or just being a part of, so many of life, I guess, that goes beyond, or even like being in competition with people, just like supporting each other, like, and I think that's really a good thing. I've seen a lot of people, I think, coming, together, and I think it's a great time for that now. I think, I don't know if it's kind of sometimes, like I said, sometimes there are certain, and I think it just varies from, but definitely certain scenes where people kind of have a macho, or like, I guess if you think like a certain idea of what bluegrass, I would say in the old time scene, you don't always, and a lot of people in the bluegrass scene too, I think they're super, I hate to like be like, oh, I have had a few, which I guess with anything, you have a lot of people that are encouraging, but then sometimes some people will say the things that stick out to you the most that are negative, and I think unfortunately, but I've had people say things like, oh, well, you'll never get anywhere if you stick with old time music, or or talk to you in a way that maybe they wouldn't talk to somebody else if you weren't a woman, or like you said, like the idea of like, oh, well, we only have this amount of people to book, versus just based upon music, versus like that sort of thing. But yeah, I would say I've probably had a few experiences, but I mean, you would hope that everybody will maybe, I think things like this, or sharing other stories, and just maybe people will hopefully come around and learn from that, like, and change, it's changed some of those opinions. I've seen some of it change, I think, even since I was, a youth, as far as some of the things, like opinions about that sort of thing, but definitely probably still get it today, as far as certain people who just, like you said, don't take you serious, or you're just a girl band, or things like that, which aren't nice things, to say. But then there's a lot of people who are really supportive right now, and I think that's great too. So I always like to think about the people who are doing, because there's always going to be people try to, but I do think in the industry, and just in general as a community, it's a really important thing to highlight these voices and to be supporters of that, because you're going to have the other end of people who are like, So the Osbournes, who were, an interesting family, her mother was an Osbourne, Ellen Mae Osbourne, and I heard a lot of stories from my dad about them growing up. But yeah, so her mom was from Cabin Creek, and then, in Lansing, North Carolina, which isn't far. So, and then, then they had moved up north. And so, like, Johnny Miller, who was another old-time fiddler, he played with Ella Bell and recorded with her and helped her with New River Ranch and all that. But she was a super strong as far as like organizing all that with Neva Ranch and Sunset Park, and just a lot of her songs are so strong. And I think she was definitely an influence. I think some of her songs are really great. Kay Justice is one lady we interviewed for our Women in Roots project, and who's also a great singer. And she sang a little song like "Tear Down the Fences." And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that song for a long time. It kind of stuck in my head as a great song lately. But I think she's definitely left a big influence. I think I really like, one thing I do think, like you said, is as women, like, I think sometimes if somebody isn't afraid just to be like, hey, you didn't give me a break. Like, I've done that to my friends sometimes, or something like that, or like things like that, or women not being afraid to step up there and, just say, or blah, blah. And or strong women like Olivelle, or like people we've talked about, like doing those things. Maybe some people are a little more blunt with it, or not, just in a in a funny way. But sometimes that does kind of make people think or changes things. And I think that it makes it easier for the next generation of musicians to like be able to not have to worry about some of those things. Yeah, I think kind of what we mentioned, maybe sometimes it was like, obligations or roles, or just whoever was, some culture thing, or, like what some people were pushing, like too. But I do think, like I said, I think that it's important to like speak, mention those things. And then, but I don't know. I think that's kind of a hard question. I don't know exactly why. I think it could be, I think people, personalities sometimes, or people's whatever. Like I said, in my personal experience, I saw, there's definitely a lot of strong males, and definitely like, but there were also a fair amount, like I mentioned, Jeanette, or like my parents, or like different people that I saw that were really strong in that tradition too for me. But I guess farther back, I guess, you would have, I don't know if it was the recording industry was doing at that time, or just like locally, like maybe just the role of like, you say family, like having to deal with different things. I think it just depends on the song. There are certain songs that, I've changed maybe a little bit to fit what I thought was my perspective. And then other songs, I didn't really feel like, that. And I think, even if you look back to like recordings, I think you see both people singing from different people's points of view, like the Carters or whoever, like, but then also some people changing it up to make it more themselves. So I think it would just depend on the song matter. For me, like, and like what was made sense to me, because, obviously everybody, despite, whatever, you have your different, I guess, outlooks on whatever that song means to you, or how you would express it to the world, Yeah. So, and I'm definitely not one that always, keeps things to, like just the recording or whatever, because for me, music was such a, like I said, such an alive thing. Even like recordings of like, say the old recordings of like, like some of the the Carter family were so much alive, because like you would see Jeanette, like, you know what I mean? Like there was such a live connection. Or like, Henry Witter played with my Uncle Albert, like he recorded some of those in the 20s. So even beyond recordings, I think it was such an alive connection, and realizing, people are, we're all like keeping some, like it's an evolving thing, right? And so, and people were always influenced by all these different things. So I've never been one to just be like, I'm just going to do exactly like a recording. I think I've always my dad always said, well, or my mom too, like, oh, part of like, is putting yourself into your fiddling or your singing or whatever is, because you can only be yourself. You can't, there's already been somebody else that's done, that. So being yourself, I think it's cool to hear homage, or can hear like where something came from, like, oh, you can tell they learned from such and such, or like listen to this, but also being like, oh, that person's totally their own person, So I think that's kind of important, I think, to me in my music too, is just, being yourself, because you can only be yourself, my definition of old time music, like I said, that can be a lot of different things, like we mentioned, to different people depending on. But for me, I think it's home, it's my family, it's carrying on traditions that were passed on to me by people I really love, and remembering, like, I think for me it was just like it was such a community thing growing up. And there, like you said, whether it's all these strong people that, kind of kept these songs maybe for so many reasons, or dancing. It's just a beautiful thing. And I think it's a beautiful way to share. And I think also relate to so many other people, whether it's old time music or whether it's some other genre. There's so many ways that music connects us, I think. And I've seen, like, when I went to a folk festival and some other tradition from somewhere else, there's so much similarities, and it makes us, I don't know, it's such a good way to connect, I think. But also, for old time music, I just think it's an important part of, like, as far as mountain music in general, I would say, or like what the traditions I grew up with, it was a real way of like I said, doing something you just enjoy doing with your friends and family. But also, I think on occasion, I think growing up in the area, there's sometimes assumptions made about your, like, I grew up going to a real small school, and sometimes even, like, 40 minutes down the way, like, they would say, oh, them kids up on the mountain, they're backwards. Kind of assumptions about, being your intelligence or whatever. And I think it was something really to be proud of, because a lot of people were like, oh, this is beautiful. They travel to this area, like, what a beautiful tradition, what a beautiful music, and it's so, a lot of people like Doc Watson or whoever, like all these people who have, really inspired people from all over the world. Like, when I've traveled, people know a lot of the music, like tunes, or things like that. I think it was a real way to find, like, self-confidence, and, just kind of, and where you're from and who you are, and not to be, like, because sometimes people say, oh, make fun of the way you talk, or things like that. And I think it's I think it's a beautiful thing. And and for me, I think it's just what I've always known, but also I think it's, like, a lot of great way of carrying on. Yeah, something that can make people proud of where they're from, or even on a wider, I think, when I say this area, but also I think it's for everyone, everywhere, that play old time music. I think it's a real way to connect with people from all over the world, certain type of music they love. So I think growing up, there was a lot of the crowd that would support the music and come out to every weekend were dancers at the festivals or at concerts or wherever that follow old time music and still do in this area, are people that just love to do that for recreation, or whatever you want to call it, for fun. They'll go out and, do flat-footing or square dancing, two-stepping, all that. And it's just a real kind of ties hand in hand. So it's kind of definitely like an interactive audience, I would say, or just like in a community setting. Just like a jam, you'll find people that's just dancing. And for me, like, my great grandpa was a dancer. But I learned from, just being, a lot of different, like Wanda Klein was a dancer. I would, give us up. There's a lot of, just great dancers that do that every weekend. They just love to dance. But it's such a big part. I think it ties hand in hand. A lot of the music itself, I think, is like the fiddle, or, like the banjo rhythms. Like, it all kind of, ties in together. I think it's just kind of a part of each other sometimes. Yeah. I would say, obviously, for shows, it would be great. Like, as the, like, our, booking women musicians. One thing I've tried to do with the Women in Roots project is, like, have those stories online, or a catalog of, like, network. If you want to support, like, this cane maker, or you want to buy this person's musicians, like, a online catalog of these people's work, of, like, so if I want to go and, like, find, and I think that would be a great thing for here too, just ways where people can support, or book people, or just, like, sharing, seeing who's, like, I don't know. I just think, like, reaching out to your communities. I guess that's what I've tried to do. Like, I think for me, I think it's like a wide circle of, like, okay, well, how do we, capture stories from people, maybe especially people who are getting up in years, but also how do we inspire the younger generation to keep things going too, or feel like their voices getting, shared too. So I think that's, just, I guess, like between, I try to teach with the jam program, which Brett is a great resource, and she does a lot of things with that too. But also, I think like, I don't know. I think like opportunities to perform as a musician myself, I think that's great. Recordings, whatever you can do. I think obviously, Well, I would hate to just name one person because I think that would be hard for me. I think that's a little hard, but there are a lot of women, like I said, I mentioned earlier, that I think are doing a great job, and probably, 5 million others that aren't probably are well known or aren't as well known that are doing the same thing. I mean, I do think, like I said, for me as someone who grew up in old time music traditions, or I think it's great to see, like you said, more people's different perspectives being shared, but also like just hopefully keeping on, with the music, and just especially I think post-COVID to see a lot of the jams and like dances and festivals and things coming back, because I think that's been hard because it has been so much of something that ties people together. Not to be able to do that. So I think hopefully that'll come back strong as well, that part of things. And then, like more projects, just keeping things going. I don't know. And I also think just like adding to it, like I personally love to write music, but like I think, I don't think it's a stagnant thing. I think there's a lot of things that are great that kind of, are passed on, but also like each person, feeling, adding to that story, whatever way it might be.